So I have sent the file for today's lesson in the chat. Those who are able to view it clearly through the screen sharing may do so. And those who are unable to view it clearly through the screen sharing, please view the file in any screen that you're currently using. So today we're going to continue our class on the differentiating and the yes, so we are going to continue our class on differentiating an inclusive particle. Today we're going to talk about the continue the class, and then today we're going to talk about usage case, and mainly on the direct usage case that we were already talking. I think we did a very brief introduction of this during the introductory class. So as we know that each particle will be discussed in this same manner. First, the introduction of particles, then the association based on the suffix letter if those particles are dependent particles, and then finally the usage case. So here we are introducing the usage case. Not much focus on the inferential usage case, mostly on the direct usage case. The one reason why it is so is because this particular particle do not have an inferential usage case as much as the ones that was there during the ornamental and inclusive case. This particular particle, it only has direct usage case and one more inferential, but we will discuss about it, but there is nothing much to discuss about it. It's just a single usage case, which is more or less an inferential, and it is very much used in our day-to-day life. So before we begin our class, I will be reciting the verse of dedication. Today's class, we will be dedicating a verse to Lord Manjushri. And so we begin with the line of dedication, the first line, that is the line of dedication. So this line of dedication comes from the praise to Manjushri. It's a text. So this first line is not written by me. Lama tong kubo chuju jambe yang la chatselo. Jambe sherab chungne retizi. Sherab lame deshi nam kitu. Kembe ishi dronam trezeba. Lama time gombo la chatselo. Lama time gombo la chatselo. So in this particular verse, I will be translating it here, roughly translating it, and then the actual translation will be available with the material that will be provided in the channel. So the first line, which is the verse line of dedication, this particular line, it means that Lama, which means Guru, it means Guru, I prostrate to you, I bow down to you, and also in an inferential manner, I take refuge to you, O Guru Manjushri. So this is the line of dedication. The verse of dedication, Jambe Shirab Chungne Retitsin. Jam means glorious. Pel means jump. Jump means someone that is glorious or beautiful in the physical form. Pel means someone who is majestic. So glorious and majestic, the originator of all wisdom and the one who holds the fiery sword of wisdom in their hands. Shirap Lame Deshin Namkitu, the one who is venerated by all the Tathagatas of the 3 times and the 10 direction, whose wisdom is unparalleled. Lame means unsurpassable. So the wisdom that is unsurpassable, the one whose wisdom is unsurpassable, and the one who is venerated by the Tathagatas of 10 times, the Tathagatas of 3 times in 10 directions. The wisdom of whose mind, liberates the sentient beings from the samsara. I prostrate to you, O the Lord, the Lord without any stain. So here when we say stain, we are primarily focusing on the stain by the ignorance that is void of any wisdom pertaining emptiness. So to be understood as the ignorance of self-grasping attitude. So one who is free from that sort of stain and ignorance, O Guru Manjushri, the Lord, I prostrate to you. Now, with this verse of dedication, with this dedication, verse of dedication, let us begin our today. Great blessings and auspiciousness bestowed upon us by Lord Manjushri. So we are going to revisit this particular verse we see here. This verse is something that we're going to revisit. So we have already discussed this particular verse during our class of the introduction to the differentiating and inclusive particles. So we're going to revisit it. The reason why we're revisiting this particular 2 line of the verse of the 3 lines that is of the different that explains or that tells us about the differentiating and inclusive particle is because here we are going to witness, or here we're going to observe this 2 word, che du. And these 2 are the direct usage case that we're going to discuss today, cheba and duba. So chedu is an abbreviation of the word chebatang duba. So this particular word, as we see. So this is shortened or abbreviated into the word chedu. And these 2 are the direct tunjur. So you see that it's called tunjur. So we have 2 types of association. Da, jur, da, which refers to the suffix letter, chinju, da, jur, association based on suffix letters, and tunjur, association or the usage case based on the function of the statement. So here we see the particular influence of a statement over the particle. So tunjur, where we're going to use it by its meaning, by its function as a statement, by its function as a nature of a statement. So the 2 direct usage cases, are chebatang, duba, chedu. And that is the reason why we are going to revisit here. This particular line, the entire line, if we see from here to this, gives us the introduction to the particles of the differentiating and inclusive case. But upon that, if we somewhat pay attention to this particular two words here, we also understand that this also tells us the usage case of the particular particle. So therefore, so let me first recite this. So we understand that these 11 are the particles of chepa, differentiating case, dupa, inclusive case. And so just by the statement of these two words, chedu, we understand that it is talking about the usage case. So the differentiating and inclusive particles are used in the case of differentiating and the case of inclusive. And so these 11 particles can also be understood as the differentiating particles when used in the statement of differentiating case, and inclusive particles when used in the inclusive when used in the inclusive statement. So therefore, the nature of the particle being influenced by the nature of the statement and not the other way around. Okay, so from the tree of excellent speech, the particles kam, ngam, tam, nam, pam, mam, hum, ram, lam, sam, tam are particles of differentiating and inclusive case. So here we notice these two, which are understood as, which can be understood as the usage case, the direct usage case, the differentiating, and the inclusive case. So therefore, we have two direct usage case, differentiating case, and inclusive case. Okay, cheba ni. Jeba kanshina. Chi chik namjang mangburu chebe chi chik namjang mangburu chebe sikche pechue ki cheba la cheba ser. So this particular definition, the way it is written, we see that there is a lot of repetition of the word cheba. So it states that these are any statement. So these are usage cases are always a statement. It's never a particle. It's always a statement. So these are any statement. So these are type of statement. These are statement. It could be any statement which fulfills these requirements. So in which the differentiating particles are used in order to separate a collective into numerous subgroup or classification. So we see that this particular type of statement has to fulfill two criteria. First is that it should fulfill the criteria. The first criteria it should fulfill is the criteria that is apparent by its nature. That is, it should be a statement that separates a collective. When we say collective here, we mean a name that represents a collective of a something. For example, if we have the word color, color is a noun that's collective of all the different colors. If we say animal, animal is a collective noun of names of all the different types of animals. So similarly, here the collective means a collective of that represents a group. So it's a statement in which that particular collective is being classified or is being separated into numerous subgroup or classifications. So this particular collective, this particular statement functions to separate a collective into many different subgroup or classification. This is the first criteria. So if a statement is doing such, it might be a differentiating case. It might be, because even though it might be a differentiating case, the point is that there are many different, there may be other particles that are capable of doing it. So the second criteria is that the particle that is used in order to separate or differentiate or to separate each of these different subgroup or classifications, or the particle that is associated with each of these numerous subgroup or classifications should be differentiating particle. So here we see that these 11 are known as differentiating particle. Why? Because these are used in statement that is of the nature of differentiating. So in this case, we cannot call them differentiating and inclusive particle. We have to call them differentiating particle. Differentiating, which is cheba. And then we use the sixth grammatical case, that is of the relative case, chebe, where we show the relation between a particular a particular classification and the main. So chebe, these are connective particle. What type of connective particle? These are connective particle that functions in a statement of differentiating. So these are called differentiating particles. So two criteria that verifies and validates a statement to be of the differentiating case. First is that the statement should be in a way that it differentiates a collective into numerous subgroup or classifications. Second, the particle that associates with these numerous separated subgroup or classifications, or the particle that functions to separate these numerous subgroup or classifications, should be differentiating particles. So therefore, if a statement has both of these requirements, or if a statement qualifies with both of these requirements, then this particular statement is known as differentiating usage case. Penna, kuncho sumni, sange sam, chö sam, gendu no. So, for example, 3 jewels are Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. So here you see that the collective in this particular statement is the 3 jewels, where we see that the collective is the 3 jewels. And the different or the numerous subgroup or the different classifications are the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. So therefore, the collective, that is the 3 jewels, is now separated in their separated into individual classifications or subgroup of Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. And the particle that is used in order to separate them is the differentiating particle. In this case, we see that the differentiating particle is some. And this is because this is due to the rule that we have learned during the association based on suffix letter. Since the suffix letter here is sa, it will be followed by some. So that is the reason why we have used some here. Similarly here, the suffix letter is sa, followed by some. And since this is the last one and there is no further classification needed, or more, there is no classification coming after it, there is no need for the usage of this particular particle after this. Instead of which, I have just used the recompound particle to state that the classification has ended here. So we also see how the recompound particle functions in this type of statement, where it acts as the indicator that the classifications have now finished. There is no more classification after this. So, Sangye Sam, Chö Sam, Gendu No, which are the 3 classifications of the collective that is Guncho Sum, the 3 jewel. And similarly, Riksung Gompo Ni, Jenri Si Sam, Jambe Yang Sam, Chana Dorje Cheso. So here it's the same. We're using the differentiating particle in order to classify the to classify the subgroup, or in order to separate or differentiate the subgroup. So here the collective Riksung Gombo, which is the lord of the three families. So lords of the three different families of Buddha. This is our collective. And then the subgroup here is the first one is the Avalokiteshvara, second one is the Manjushri, third one is the Vajrapani. So these are the three lords of the three different families. So we see that these three, that is Avalokiteshvara, Lord Avalokiteshvara, Lord Manjushri, and Lord Vajrapani, all of these three are separated or differentiated by the usage of the differentiating particle. Since we did not see a rule that was separately stated for the post suffix letter sa. That is, we have a rule that is applicable for the post suffix letter ta, tata, which we already discussed, which will be followed by the particle tam. But for the post suffix letter sa, there is no particular rule that was stated separately. So we just follow the rule that is applied to the suffix letter sa, and then use the particle accordingly. So we see that this particular particle separates or differentiates the subgroup of the collective, the subgroup being Avalokiteshvara, Cherisi, Manjushri, Jambeyan, Vajrapani, Chana Dorje. So these three subgroups are separated by the usage of differentiating particle, and the collective is Riksung Gombo, lords of the three family. Now, like we said in the description, in the definition, there are two criteria that should be fulfilled. And we see that in both of these example statements, we see that both of these criteria are fulfilled. First, we see that both of these statements are statements in which a collective is separated or differentiated in its subgroup or classifications. 1. 2. We see that the particles that are used for separating these groups or differentiating these groups is the particle of differentiating case. Since both of these criteria are fulfilled, we consider both of these statements to be the usage case of differentiating case. So we consider both of these statements as differentiating usage case. Now, note that in this particular type of statement, the differentiating particle are functioning more like a comma. So here we see that the differentiating particles more or less functions as a comma. What it does is that it separates each of these different classifications and acts as a punctuation. So it functions more like comma. When we have more than one type of, or more than one classification, it functions as comma to provide us with classifications of a collective. Okay, so this one. In this particular example, we see karpoham nakpo. For example, white or black. Yak kam di. Yak or tree. D is the female yak. Sangam yin, good or bad. So in this particular usage case, we find that the particle, the differentiating particle, functions as or. Rather than comma, it functions as an or, providing an option. Okay, white or black, it's an option. Okay, yak or d, it's an option. Okay, good or bad, it's an option. So when there is there's two type of options, we also use this particular differentiating case But in this case, the differentiation is done in a way that it is providing us an option. Or, so it's providing, it functions as a conjunction which provides an option, or. So here, instead of comma as a punctuation, in case where they are only showing the different subgroups, definitely it functions more like comma. But in this particular case, we see that instead of functioning as a comma, it functions more as or. It functions more as or. So therefore, differentiating particle functioning as or, where an option is being provided. Okay, so note that the function of differentiating particle as or can be understood as both an answer or a question, depending on the nature of statement. So the thing is that even though an option is provided, sometimes the option provided could be as an answer. Sometimes the option provided could be an interrogative statement where you ask someone, do you want this or that? Or it could be an answer stating like, okay, I want either this or that. So therefore, it depends on the statement. The statement itself could be an answer statement or a question statement, even though there is the same usage as or. But it depends on the statement whether a particular statement is to be understood as a question or an answer. For example, so here, the first one is a question. So therefore, so in this particular statement, the question was asked. So therefore, the second statement, where the option is there as an or, a conjunction of or, but in this particular case, it should be understood that the statement is simply and entirely an answer statement. So, what would you like to eat? That was the question. I prefer to have either momo or tukpa, which is a soup noodle. So here we see that even though this particular particle functions as a or statement, this particular statement is not a question statement, but an answer statement. And the very reason why this or is a part of an answer statement has nothing to do with the particle itself. It's just because of the statement being a question statement. And so here we see that this usage that I was talking about, this is the usage, which is of the inferential case, is usage of the differentiating and inclusive particle as an interrogative statement. So the particle is used at the end of a statement, not only at the end of the statement. In the case of being interrogative, it is always used after a conformational particle, or in some case, it's used after a verb that functions as seemingly a conformational statement. It's not as a conformational particle. It's not a conformational particle because it's not a particle, but it's a verb that comes at the end of a statement, and it acts as a conformational particle. Something like a pseudo-conformational particle, but this is not a word, so we will refrain from using this particular word. We'll say it's a verb that functions as if it's a conformational particle. So therefore, when in this case we see that nam is following hin, which is a conformational particle. It's a conformational particle, it's a conformational verb. So it follows that, and when it's a conformational function, the usage of nam, what it does is that it somewhat creates a counter option, which in a way, what it does is that it makes the entire statement into a question. It says, is it? Instead of saying it is, it becomes more like, is it? Means, what would you like to eat? And this particular statement becomes an interrogative statement. Sometimes in the colloquial, it's in the colloquial system. It's something that is used used quite often, so I will introduce it. So usage of na. So what happens is that it's a colloquial, it's more in colloquial system, where what we do is that we repeat the same suffix letter of the conformational same conformational particle, the suffix of this same suffix of the conformational particle, in order to make it a question. And this is something that is in the colloquial system, taking in na. And then there's also another one where what we do is that in some case, if there is a conformational statement, what we do is that we add a pa. So and we just add the third grammatical case after the pa, impe. That also is a question, and in the colloquial system. So this is more like in the colloquial system. And also in some case we have imke, ke. So these are more questions in the colloquial system. But in the written language, what we do is that we add this particle, the differentiating and inclusive particle. In here, it becomes interrogative particle. So we add these interrogative particle at the end of a statement, and it follows either a conformational statement, a conformational particle, or it follows a verb that functions as a conformational particle. It's a verb. Even the conformational particles, they are conformational verb. Similarly, other verbs are also verb, but the thing is that these particular verb are type of verb which are also known as conformational verb, which the other verbs are not part of, but they sometimes function as to be so. Sometimes also, like we already discussed, that sometimes when a particular narration becomes too wordy, what we do is that we have the we use particular rule to erase some of the particles sometimes, so that the narration doesn't become too wordy. Because having a very wordy narration also destroys the particular structuring of the statement. It becomes too wordy, and it no longer feels very appealing to read. So therefore, sometimes what we do is that we erase those particular particles in that case. So when these interrogative particle, now interrogative because they're used in interrogative case, are used after a conformational particle or after a verb that acts as a conformational particle, then the particular statement becomes interrogative. And this is the inferential usage of this particle. Okay, so now the second one is the usage of conjunction as or, but in a statement of answer. What would you like to eat? I prefer to eat momo or tuppa. Kera kala kang sayinam. Ngala momo kam tuppa kang yuna de. De means prefer. I would like, I would prefer. I desire, so de. Okay, so now note that the function of differentiating particle as or can be understood as both answer in question dependent on the nature of the nature of statement. So now this is the particular example where it functions as or, but the statement is interrogative and not an answer statement. Here we see that the particle is following the conformational statement, conformational particle. And since it has the suffix ta, it will be followed by tam. The previous one was hin. It has na as suffix, will be followed by nam. So kera sahan la momo kam tuba sui de tam. For example, does your restaurant make either momo or tukpa, which is a soup noodle? Now it becomes an interrogative statement. Why does it become an interrogative statement? Because we have this particular particle that comes, the interrogative particle, at the end of the statement. So note that these two things were stated not because this particle has any power on making a statement into answer or question statement. No. This particle has no power over it. It only has an influence over the statement to function as or, providing option. Other than that, it has no influence at all upon the statement. But even if it's used in that particular statement, the usage case here is strongly that the usage case here is in the interrogative statement. So this is in order to introduce the inferential usage case as the interrogative statement. Okay, so now we have the second direct usage case, that is of the differentiating an inclusive particle usage case as the inclusive case now. Duba ni, duba, which is duba. We already discussed cheba, which has two particular usage. One, if there is numerous subgroup or classification, if there's numerous subgroup or classification, we use it as a comma. If there's only two, then most of the cases we use it as or. So two of these usage cases. Now the second usage case, which is a direct usage case, which is of the inclusive case, duba. Duba ni, juba khan shi na namdang thuma shi. Chikdu dube tsikte. Chikdu dube tsikte pechki dubala ser. Meaning that these are statements in which numerous classification or subgroup are included in a collective by the usage of the inclusive particle. So it may seem that it functions similar to the differentiating, where it may seem that all of these are differentiated, but in this case, the thing is that instead of differentiating, what it does is that it links everything like a chain and then finally submits everything into the collective. Though it could be understood like a comma in this case, but the function, so I said, like we discussed, the particle itself, the way it tried to manifest itself in a statement is not important. But the influence of a statement over the particle is what actually is the reason why we classify these usage cases into different usage cases. That is the reason why we have so many different usage cases, because that statement, the nature of the statement, is what takes takes the precedence, what is the one which takes the precedence, which takes the greater significance rather than the particle itself. So as we observe this in this particular statement, in this particular example statement, you may see that, oh, it only seems that the classifications were written before, and now we have the collective written. It only seems as if the positions were reversed. And the way the particles are used are quite similar to the way we used it during the differentiating case. But this is what actually changes the nature of the particular statement. It may not seem something very drastic or something of a very much of a significant change, but because these positions are changed, now instead of differentiating a collective into different separate groups, we are stating the different groups and finally collecting them into one collective, including them into one collective. So this is how the particular nature changes. So therefore, in the translation too, it may not seem as much has changed because it functions as a comma. Some may say like, oh, it's just the same thing. Before you had the collective in the beginning of the statement, and then you wrote all the classifications by the usage of comma. So the particular particle do not seem to be changed in terms of expression, and this is very much true. It does not change in terms of expression in appearance, but the very change in the position is the reason why the nature of the statement has changed. Now it has changed from a differentiating statement to an inclusive statement. And the change is by the reversal of the position. So, sasam chuvam metang luni chungwashiwo. Sa, earth, chu, water, me, fire, lung, wind. Chungwashi, 4 elements. So, water, fire, earth, water, fire, and wind are 4 elements. So these 4 are 4 elements. So we see that each of these different classification which are stated are now included in the final collective. Okay, so the second example. Direct cognition, inferential cognition, and trustworthy scriptures or oral transmission are 3 valid cognition. So there are 3 types of cognition. Dependent on their object. So the direct cognition, inferential cognition, and the trustworthy scripture or oral transmission of one's guru are the three classifications or the 3 subgroup, and then all of these are finally included in the valid cognition, a collective that is valid cognition. So therefore, we understand that these 2 particles, which needs to fulfill 2 criteria. First, it should be a statement in which different subgroup or classification should be included into a collective. That should be the nature of the statement as a collective statement. And the second criteria is that the particle that does so should be the inclusive particle. So since both of these statements fulfills this particular criteria, these statements are understood as the inclusive statement. Okay, note that here the inclusive particles, though functions as comma, so the representation of the inclusive particles are similar as when it was the differentiating case as comma. Its function in contrast to differentiating case is to inclusive of classification. So the function, which is in contrast to the differentiating usage case, in which you differentiate a collective into numerous group, here we take numerous group and include them into one collective. So the usage or the function is in contrast, is different from the differentiating case. Okay, so these are the usage case of the differentiating and inclusive particles. The first usage case is of the differentiating usage case, in which particular statement should fulfill two criteria. First criteria should be that the particular statement should differentiate a collective into different subgroups. Second criteria is that this separation or differentiating should be done by the differentiating particles. And these particles, since these are dependent particles, will follow each of these classification as a name on the basis of the suffix letter. And then the second thing was that sometime in the classification, the particle functions as comma. Sometimes it also functions as or to provide options. And so since it provides options, it provides options, so it is used as or. But even though it is used as or, there are two different type of particle usage. There are two different usage of the or. One as an answer statement, one as a question statement. And the question statement is an inferential usage case of the particle, the inclusive and differentiating and inclusive particle. So it becomes the particle of interrogative case, in which if the particle follows the statement and is appearing at the end of a statement after a conformational particle or conformational verb, then it functions as a question. It functions as a question. And if this particular option of or is given in that particular type of statement, it's used in the statement of question. Whereas if it's not used in that particular type of statement, it is used in answer statement like this. Then the second direct usage case is of the inclusive case, where in that statement, numerous classification or subgroup are included in a single collective. And this particular usage is known as usage of inclusive particle. It needs to fulfill two criteria. First criteria, particular statement to be validated as a inclusive case should always function in order to provide a function where numerous subgroups are collected in one collective. Second, the particle that is used in order to do that should be inclusive particle. Note that even though it may appear as an expression, it may appear as if these particular particle functions in a way similar to the differentiating particle that is appearing as a comma, functioning as a comma, but the usage case are different. One is used as a differentiating, other is used as an inclusive. And so we come back to the idea that the particle do not have any influence whatsoever to decide the nature of a statement, only in very rare case, for example, in the case of the first grammatical usage as a first grammatical case, where the particle has somewhat of an influence over the statement. And then we also understand that those type of particles which have influence over the statement do not manifest as an expression in translation. Rather, it is pervasive towards the statement and acts as a functioning of influencing the particular statement. Whereas all of the other ones that we have studied from now, apart from the first grammatical case, have always manifested themselves into translation. Depending on the usage case, of course, the particle themselves don't have a meaning by itself. These are not words which is capable of providing meaning by themselves, like name and certain type of words, like the action words. These are more like companion words, a connective particle, which comes under the bound morphemes. So They do not function in order to provide a meaning by themselves. Okay, so this is the usage case of the differentiating and inclusive particle. So this is it for today. So before I recite the verse for today's, so the verse that I'm going to recite today is also not written by me. It's a verse that is taken from the Praise to Manjushri. So before reciting it, if anyone has questions, I will be taking questions now. Punctuation mark. We have tang, which can also function in the same way. And it also functions as and if there's only two. If there's only two, it functions as and. Otherwise, it functions as it can also function as punctuation if there are multiple. If there are multiple subgroups or multiple names that needs to be used in that particular statement. Okay, so do we have more questions? Yes, you can change this. It is changeable. So yutam meto or metam yuto. You can write it in either way. And to with a to, so the last one should be to. Yutam meto. So, any more questions? Do we have any more questions? Does anyone?
Yes, Tanzila, I have a question. Can you open the last slide that you showed us?
So, yes.
Yes. So this may not be related to the particle, but I wanted to understand. So in English, we have like comma for earth, water, after earth and after water. But in Tibetan, instead of having tek, we have this, what do you call this?
Shit.
Yes. Why is this there? Because this comes at the end of a sentence, right? As far as I know. But after each word, and then this is a whole sentence, if I see it in English. So I was a bit confused why it's there.
Okay, so thank you for the question. So the thing is that this particular punctuation, it functions in that way where we use it at the end of a statement also. So now you see me using the word also. That means that that is not the only case where we will use this particular punctuation. It will also be used. So this particular thing comes it becomes confusing when we consider the usage of the word statement and the usage of the word sentence to be interchangeable, which is not the case. If something is a statement in Tibetan, it may not be an entire statement. Not an entire sentence, meaning that even a single narration, that is the single name. So this we discussed during the first grammatical case where we said that even a single word such as dashi could be considered to be a narration and a statement. So here, this is the example of usage of the she after the narration and not the sentence. So it will come, it can also come after a sentence, after a paragraph, after the end of entire book or a chapter, but it also can be used after the end of a narration or a statement. So statement can be understood as okay. So we will use the word narration here. So this is a narration, a single narration of a name. That is it. So a single name could be a narration. It needn't be an entire structure of combination of names and word to have this particular punctuation. So this particular punctuation can also come after a statement, and this was also seen during the usage of the recompound particles after the name. So let me give you an example here. So
Also, Tanzila, what difference would it make if I don't use this punctuation and I just use tech and not this? Would it make difference?
definitely. Then the thing is that what will happen is that each of these narration will not be considered to be each of these narration will not be considered to be a singular classification. So it will be it grammatically speaking, in context of particle, it will be correct, but in the context of punctuation, it will be wrong. So even though here we may give greater greater precedence to the particle, saying that the particle is manifesting as comma, but in reality it's the combination of the punctuation and the particle which functions as a comma here. And now the thing is that you may say that why not just the punctuation? Because then in these cases, what happens is that each of these uh, punctuation is coupled with this particular particle, so it means an end of something. So thus, what it does is that in here it functions more like a full stop rather than a comma. Or in some cases, it could be also used as comma, depending on the very statement itself. There is a continuation after this, then definitely it will be functioning as a comma. But if it's the end of a statement, then this will function as a full stop. But in any case, it comes to the understanding that each of these punctuation in with the combination of the particle, what it does is that it individualizes each and every one of these classification. So therefore, in here, the very action is done by this particle, so there is no need of the punctuation. This particle has the ability to be used as conjunction. So when we say conjunction, we bring out two individual. So it's by automatically it could be understood that we are taking two separate phenomena. But here, what it does is that with the usage of the punctuation, we're able to establish the individuality of the classification, which is also done by the particle, but it needs the punctuation in this case.
But then what about the individuality of May and Lung? Then
This, as I said, the particle tang, since it functions as a conjunction, like and, we understand that there are two separate phenomena to be conjoined, to be used with a conjunction. We cannot use conjunction with a single phenomena. So therefore, by the nature of this particle, what it does is that it brings two individual phenomena. So therefore, by inference, we understand that the two phenomena are individual, which is not possible with hum and some. If we have more than one classification. But if there are two, then we see that it functions as another conjunction, that is the or. And so it's providing option, and inferentially we understand that there are two individual. In that case, we see that we don't need to use the punctuation. If the particle by themselves has the ability to either directly or inferentially provide the understanding that two of these phenomena are individual, then there is no use of the usage of shape. It does not function does not function to provide any aid here. But if it is not being able to be done by the particle, then we have to take the help of the punctuation. So I hope that it was clearer.
Yes, Tanzila, you were writing an example, no, on the next slide, I think, related to this when I interrupted you.
And was it this one?
Uh, I don't remember.
This was with the first grammatical case.
Okay. Okay. The individuality part.
Yes. So,
Okay.
so therefore, like I said, if the particle by themselves, so let me give you an example here. Where is it? Here we see that we are using the same particle, the differentiating particle here, actually, but we're not using the punctuation because why is it is because the particular particle here is understood as or, and so it acts as a conjunction, and it functions to provide an option. So if there is an option, we understand that both of these things are not the same and that they are individually different to each other. So that is the reason why the option was provided. For example, if we were to say this or that, and if both of these two things were those two things were single, there is no use of providing option. It is only by understanding that both of these two things are different that we're able to provide an option. So in this case, the particle is capable of providing the understanding of provide the understanding of individuality. But with cases like this, we must understand that it is incapable of providing it because it does not function as a conjunction. And when it does not function as a conjunction, there is no inferential understanding that this is different from the other one. But then one might argue that, oh, but since it's already a subgroup and a classification should be different and individual to each other. And I'll say yes, but normally in English we use comma, but here we have to use the particle with the punctuation in order to represent that same function, because the particle itself is incapable of doing so. That's all.
But Tanzila, can't we then use dhang between these to combine these three and not this
Yes,
part?
we can do that, but then it will no longer be a statement of differentiating case. So this
Okay.
is an example of differentiating usage case. So we use some, but yes, we can also use tongue, but then it will be a different. It will be a different statement.
Like?
If we use tongue, it will be a statement of tongue sentence. It
Okay.
is a statement of differentiating case. So like we discussed, the particular statement to be validated as a differentiating case must fulfill two requirements. So the second requirement will not be fulfilled, where the particle that is used in order to differentiate should be differentiating particle. If we use tongue, it is not a differentiating particle. It will
But the
be,
meaning,
yes,
but the
the
meaning,
meaning will be same.
oh,
Yes, the meaning will be same because tongue has uh, a few usage case, one of which is differentiating. Yes.
okay.
And now if a question might arise, it might arise that, okay, if it is that the case that it can be used as a differentiating, why should we need two particles in order to do the same thing? That could be a question, right?
Mhm.
But the thing is that the reason why we have two different particles doing the same has has meaning. It's not the meaning is not as significant as it should be, but in many cases it's in order to introduce variation in writing. So that's the reason.
I see. Just last thing, if you can show the same sentence using thang, how will you form the structure of this sentence? I'm just curious to see.
So yes, it's the same. If you're doing it with two things, right? If you're doing it with two examples, for example, here, this is an example. Nga tang kong, me and him. So the statement would be me and him, or me and her, me and him, or her. So it would be me and him or her. So here we see that because there are only two classification, there is no need to use the punctuation. Like I said, if there are only two individual classification, then tang or ham or any particle that is in between is capable to function in order to show the individual. Becomes more than two. There is the point where we start using the she to show the individuality, because it's no longer two. So it's more difficult for the particle in order to show the individuality of a single classification. It's the same. The ability of tang to be used as a conjunction and depends on the fact that it is only between two individual between two names. If there are more than two, like we see sa chu, but we see at the end we have me and lung, and in between when we use tang, what we do is we use it as a conjunction. In only in case where there are two classifications, this will function as conjunction. And if it functions as a conjunction, it do not require the punctuation to indicate the individuality of the classification. But if the classification is more than two, then one must understand that any classification beyond the two will not be in the context of the conjunction. And so it is required for the uh, punctuation to be there.
Got it. Thank you, Senzilla. Thank you so much.
Okay, so
Kenla, on the slide 4, it seems Avalokiteshvara and Manjushri are not a collective themselves.
can you repeat? Very sorry.
Slide 4, Manjushri and Avalokiteshvara, they are not a collective themselves, but maybe the families are collectives. What is meant there?
Yes, so these are not collective by themselves, but the three of them together comes under the collective, that is the lords of the three families.
Okay, thank you.
So, okay, so if anyone has questions, I'll take one more question if anyone has any questions. If not, then today we will not have anyone reading, but tomorrow, sorry, the next class, we will have someone reading. So please prepare accordingly. So does anyone have any questions, any more questions? If you have any questions, I will take one more question. If not, I will read the verse of dedication and then we will end the class today. We will end today's class here. Okay, so then I will recite the I'll recite the final verse of dedication. So this is not written by me. It's from the praise to Manjushri. So So this is a change that I done. In the original text, it is our mind. Instead, I just change it to so us. So meaning by the rays, by the light of your most excellent mind, O the compassionate one. Most excellently illuminating the ignorance within us. So in the original text, it is dark. Look. So let me just write it. I'll just write the original one here. So the original line is Tağlı, which means of my mind, which means Tağlı timu barabsene means by most excellently illuminating the darkness of my mind. So I have changed my mind to us by most excellently illuminating the ignorance within us, meaning I and the sentient beings. Popa means to have the ability. So lotre popa means having the ability of, and lotre means the intellect, the intellectual ability. Sal means to give. So it means please by most excellently illuminating the darkness of ignorance within us, please provide us with the intellect and wisdom to understand the teachings of the direct transmission and the treatise, which are composed on the teachings of Buddha. So may we, so Kangyur and Danger. Kangyur means, Ka means the oral transmission. Danger are the treaties. So may please bestow upon us the intellectual ability to understand the direct transmission of Buddha and the treaties and commentaries on the transmission of Buddha. So this is the meaning of this particular verse, most wonderfully composed. This verse was most wonderfully composed and a part of the praise to Manjushri. So this is the change that I made. So those who would like to read the original one, this is here, and this is the small change that I made. And the translations will be provided with the same PDF, which will be sent in the channel. And if anyone has more questions, please post them directly on the group, or you can directly send it to me, either way. And those of you who have sent me recordings in past week, for the past 2 weeks, probably, I was very busy, was not able to answer to many of your questions, and was not able to give feedback. Some of you have sent me the homework. I wasn't able to check that, so I will do so. And I will do so and send you the feedback as soon as possible. And please listen to the recordings that were already sent. I will send one more recording, which will have the 4 portions together. And the assignments, this will now have assignment. Assignments will be provided either tomorrow in the morning or tomorrow by the evening. So the assignments will be provided. Please continue reciting, continue revising, and if anyone has any questions, ask me directly or send it in the group. So thank you very much for those who have joined me for this class. So those who are joining me for the intermediate reading class, we will have the class on Wednesday. Those who are joining me for the grammar class only, I will see you on Friday. So I hope everyone have wonderful morning, afternoon, noon, or evening, wherever they are. And thank you very much, and tashidele to everyone.